You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Hi friends, today I have a special guest. Jan Hausser is a scientist who's living in Sweden, and he works at the Karolinska Institute, where he leads research into guiding immune cells to find and destroy cancer cells. We need this research. It's amazing. But beyond the lab, he does big adventures, from backcountry skiing to skydiving, and he just loves going to untamed, beautiful natural places, and also likes to explore the inner terrain that the extreme environments reveal. John did an expedition where he and a group of others sailed across the Drake Passage to Antarctica, where they did skiing. I think just the sailing itself across the Drake Passage is an extreme adventure, but where they did skiing and a lot of other things, they were on a 20-meter sailboat, 11 people for a month, and exploring Antarctica. I'll let him fill in the details, but being isolated from the world with a group of 11 people and having to learn how to get along and to make the adventure a success, that alone is enough to fill up a show. So, Jean, I'm really happy that you're here to share with us what you did and what you do. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, and you wrote a book about it as well, right? The book is Skiing and Sailing Antarctica?
Exactly. Yeah, that just had to be done. When I returned, I just felt that something had to be written about that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Somehow you have to make the experience available because it's something that has value, not just for yourself and the other people that were there. It has value for others who can learn from your experiences. And I think sometimes that's one of the best things about Big Adventure, is that you end up with a story, but maybe even a purpose to share with the world. What is your story? What did you learn from this?
Maybe the story is I would say it starts quite much earlier than when the boat left the shores of South America, right? Because this is the story begins when I traveled to South America, to the southern shore of South America, this little town of Argentina called Ushuaia, the end of the road basically, and that's where the sailboat was leaving from. But before that, this goes back to childhood, right? Watching those explorers like Shackleton, Amundsen, Scott, Charcot, those explorers of the early 20th century, and just as a child and a teenager wanted to experience a little bit of what they saw, right? Like smelling when they smelled, like sensing when they sensed, seeing a bit of what they saw, knowing what would it feel like to following the footsteps of those explorers, and then growing up, then this turned into this drive for exploring, right? So, and I'm a scientist, so in the lab we do exploration in the intellectual realm, right? So trying to do sort of intellectual first ascents, trying to figure out things that have never been figured out before. But expedition is the same thing in the physical sense, right? That you go into places where few or nobody has been before, and you go there to see the beauty of the natural world and learn what you can from the challenges that meet you on the way, right? And so perhaps like on this trip, the challenges were came in different ways, right? So sailing the Drake Passage is a challenge in itself because it's 7 days and 7 nights, and you can't stop, right? And you don't really control the weather. Like you can sort of time your departure to make sure that you avoid the storms, but this only gets you through half of the Drake Passage, like the first 3-4 days. After that, it really depends on how fast the weather systems are going to be moving, and you can't control that. And those systems are more fast than the boat. So you basically depend on the goodwill of the sea to continue in the calm, or maybe you end up in a storm. And if you end up in the storm, it can be 10-meter high waves, like 30 feet. So that you can't control, right? And it's a challenge in the sense that it's like a 24/7 operation, right? So there you're going to be on deck like for 2 hours at a time. And it doesn't matter if it's snowing or winding or if it's raining or if the waves are crashing on deck. You're up there to watch for icebergs of other ships for 2 hours, and then you're going to be 6 hours, doing whatever you need to do for safe maintenance, sleeping, eating, resting, maybe vomiting if you're subject to seasickness. So yeah, like one of my watch was from midnight to 2 in the morning, for example, and I love that because then you really feel that you're on an adventure because you're there in the middle of the night watching for icebergs, and this is not the sort of thing that I get to do every day. So this was really the sense that you're doing something special, right? So this is one of the sort of challenges that you get on an expedition like this. And beyond this, there's what you mentioned about having to operate as a group where you can't really hide, right? Because you're 12 people in 60 feet and there's nowhere to go there. There's not really personal private space, and you have to work together because everything relies on the capacity of the group. And once you're there, you do this sort of back country skiing, right? So it's 1 week to get there, then 18 days there, essentially skiing up and down mountains. And everything is going over these sort of high glaciers where there's, should I say, it's like combining the challenges of backcountry skiing, which is normally something that you do if you're a bit bored doing black pistes. Then you go off piste and then you go backcountry, right? And this is backcountry in Antarctica. So you're going over these high glaciers, which is a problem in itself because they tend to have gaps like crevasses, which can be filled by snow, but you never know if the snow bridge that hides the crevasse is thick enough to sustain your weight. And if it doesn't sustain your weight, you can fall into it, perhaps 100 meters, when you probably don't come back from that. So you have to rope up, and then so it pretty much feels like you're skiing like a dog on the leash. Which, if you're a dog, it's okay, but a human, you might not be used to that, right? So there's all these sort of group and mental and physical challenges that I wanted to experience to basically practice the skills that facilitate functioning in a group under pressure, right? So this was beyond the adventure and the childhood dream. Practicing the skills that allow us to function in a group under pressure is one of the 3 reasons I signed up for that trip.
I think about the astronauts and the exciting times that we live in when we're talking about returning for permanent habitation on the moon and eventually Mars. People having to work in extreme environments in close spaces for an extended period of time. What you learn from this sort of a thing could really benefit programs like that as well. But there's so many, I was thinking about a boat trip that I took with a friend, and we did a crossing to the Bahamas. It wasn't that far, right? We encountered a storm, and we had 15-foot seas, and that's what the boat was rated for. And so we were pushing the limits of the technology, and it was just several hours of misery is all it was. But there were moments there where I thought, wow, we may not get out of this one. It was extreme enough that it was possible that we may not get out of it. And you're doing that across a Drake Passage, which, it's known for being some of the worst weather, if not the worst crossing on Earth. It's horrible. It's cold. The seas are massive. The currents are crazy. And what some people may not realize about that area is that there's no landmass all the way around Antarctica for storms. They can just keep cycling around Antarctica for on and on and on and build up more and more strength. And not only is it cold, but storms have the ability to just be bizarrely huge and never having the dampening effects of the continents. And so where you were with these 11 people, there's got to be this constant sort of a thought of what if something really bad happens? And how does that wear on you? How did you and the others get through that? That's hard. That's very hard.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Thanks for pointing this out, right? That this is the specificity of this traverse, that there's no landmass and it's close to the poles. So yeah, if the storm comes over, it can easily be 10-meter waves, like 30 feet, right? And the boat is bigger than that. It's 60 feet, but not much bigger. So you don't want to be there. And like, I got to be clear here that on this trip we were blessed, right? That we didn't meet a storm. There was a day where we had 60 kilometers per hour winds. I don't know what that would be in imperial units. What is that? 40,
36
50 miles per hour.
Yeah, 36.
And that was just half a day, right? So we get off easy. And but I would say that most on this trip, I didn't really have this sense of dread. Like the point of maximal fear was actually when we got on the boat and we left the dock. Right?
Yeah.
because at this time you still have a choice. Like when you're on the dock, you can hop off, right? And then the moors are cast, and then there's a gap of 10 centimeters, and then 20, and then 50, and this you can still jump, and then all of a sudden it's 2 meters, right? And then that's it. Now you're committed. And what happened for me is essentially that I vetted the expedition leader ahead of time, right? This is the person that had done it 2 or 3 times before, and the skipper is somebody who specialized into this sort of traverse. Like he had done a sailing around the world before that, and he had done the traverse like back and forth 50 times. So there's like 100 Drake passages before that, and so I just had this sense of, okay, I've done my job, I've done my homework, I researched the risks, I researched that these people are among the most capable for doing this sort of trip. And so now it's just about doing my best to support them with whatever skills I have, and basically letting go, right? And being the now, because this is the best that can be done. And if, accident or if the worst happens, that, well, so be it, right? So at the point that you decide to board the ship, you sort of accept that. And so because of all this, there wasn't really a sense of dread, of constant dread of what could happen if the storm comes, in the second half of the trip.
So you kind of have to sacrifice your expectations to some degree. It's like, okay, I'm giving into this trip. I've decided to do this, and what happens will happen. Is that the way you face it?
Yeah, it's like, almost that. So it's like before the event, you do everything to control the risk, to minimize the risk through the preparation, through the choice of people, through looking at the odds that something may go wrong, right? And preparing seriously, and once you're done all this, then it's a time to let go and just let it happen, right? To commit, do the best to support, but no longer revisiting the fears and the what if, right? Because letting go of that. I mean, for me, I feel I wasn't always in this mindset. I think this is something that I learned the mountaineering, right? When you're, let's say, if you're on these ridges, right? If you're on a high ridge and it drops on the left and it drops on the right. And initially I was going with mountain guides of this sort of terrain because I didn't have the expertise, and right. So basically you're on the ridge with your crampons on and ice aches, and there's nothing to hold on to, right? There's just air. And then there's a mountain guide like 5 feet behind you, and you have your harness and he has you on the rope. And so if you both fall, well, what can you do really, right? So hopefully he jumps on the other side of the ridge and then you're okay. But at first, like this was, I went into a freeze when I was in this sort of situation, right? This is the temptation of the body to just freeze up, because fear does that, right? It causes flight, fight, or freeze, right? So this is the freeze reaction. And then the guy who was responding to that by telling me, hey, focused but relaxed. And then I thought, but how can you think this? What if we fall? What if we die, right? And then sort of my brain answered like, well, it's not going to help you now, does it, right? So you might as well just assume you're not going to fall and you're not going to die and just operate on this basis. And this is not being delusional, because ahead of time, you've done your homework of checking, is this something that you have the skill to do? Are the conditions right? Are the odds of success reasonably high that you're not shortening your life expectancy, right? So it's like preparation plus letting go, accepting the consequence in the moment. Does that make sense?
It does. And I don't know how other people manage that sort of mental challenge, and it is a mental challenge. But there's something you said there about focus. It's a matter of, well, I'm in this situation. There's no getting out now. So I need to do what the next most important thing is. Not worry about the what ifs, not worry about the decisions I've made, not worry about too much about, the outcomes, but more about what's the next thing that must happen. And I've been in that situation several times, and I believe it's life-altering on some level, and probably in different ways for different people. But when you think about those sorts of experiences, what have you learned personally? What have you learned from that?
I mean, from being in that place, I would say probably, like, I think the learning is what I just tried to outline just now, right? Is this idea of managing risk by preparing diligently and then making a decision, go, no go, rationally. and,
Yeah.
and once this is done, then just committing and yeah, focused but relaxed on the moment, right? So I think this is the lesson from me of of these years spent preparing for this expedition, either through the mountaineering, because I prepared for this expedition by doing like 50 different high altitude climbs, and also I had this problem with height, right? Fear of heights and fear of void, of falling. So I also got a skydiving certificate, skydiving license, and did 100 skydives to sort of tame this fear and learn how to work with fear. So that is the essential lesson really to me, to yeah, like rationally consider the risks, then make a principled decision on go and no go, and after all the preparation and the diligence is done, then just going with the flow. And I mean, this is really something that I borrowed some ideas there from Brian German, right? Which is I don't know if you heard of him. He's a psychologist and world champion skydiver who wrote this book called Transcending Fear. It basically describes the psychology of dealing with pressure, like with physical risk, which boils down to the same sort of idea, right? Which is to breathe, like come to the moments, and then notice the sensations that happen, and then basically stop thinking, just flowing, right? Because if you're prepared, then the body knows what to do, essentially.
Mm-mm. Incredible. So many people never have that experience in life. I don't think. Maybe sometimes it's forced on people and they don't expect it and it happens because of some tragedy or challenge. But to choose it, right? That's a lot of what the Adventure Sports podcast is actually about. It's we choose to challenge ourselves. What led you to decide, okay, I'm really afraid of heights. I'm going to learn to overcome that, and I'm going to do this big expedition. What made you make that decision?
Right, that's a great question, and I would say, there's a combination of two factors, right? So one is just the sense of curiosity, right? So I'm a scientist by profession, and so I just love going into places that haven't been seen before, like what's on the other side, right? What's the curiosity of solving challenging problems and doing stuff that hasn't been done much before. And this is just the same sort of drive, but in the physical world, right? So
Right.
that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is is perhaps more philosophical, right? It's that like I really like the idea, and that's not from me, right? But I like this idea that on the other side of fear, there's freedom, right? So like fear can be this self-preserving mechanism, but it's sort of a blunt instrument, I think, right? So and the way you can prove this is if you think about skiing, for example, right? So if you want to ski a steep slope, you have to do this thing where you point your ski straight down the slope, and then you keep turning them so that you make a turn, and then you have to point them straight down the slope again so you can make the next turn.
Right.
That's how you ski, right? So there has to be a time where you're skiing straight down for a moment. And what the body does naturally in response to that is, if it's too steep, then we get afraid. And the natural response is to the two things, is to freeze, as we've seen earlier, right? It's like natural response to fear is to freeze.
Right.
And to lean back. And so that's really not the thing you want for survival, right? Because freezing makes you poor at making good movements that you would need to make your turn. And leaning back removes the control, right? Because to control our skis, we have to have pressure on the front so we can guide them along the turn. If we lean back, we have no control over where they're going. And then we fall, right? So here, fear is like this blunt instrument that actually reduces our odds of survival, right? So maybe on average over the generations, it's been mostly good, but it's really a blunt instrument. So I think we want to be able to listen to fear as a signal, but on the other side of fear, there's freedom of doing things that maybe we judge for primal reasons to be undesirable, but are actually wonderful. Like jumping from a plane, right? It's like this wonderful experience of seeing the world, being in the sky, seeing the world from above, and in the silence of just having a piece of nylon over your head. I mean, this is an experience where fear stands in the way, and it's so beautiful to have this in one's life. So yeah, this was the other drive, like a philosophical exploration almost of what freedom becomes possible if we get to work with our fear as opposed to being controlled by it.
That's amazing. Very, very well said. And I love your example of skiing. I've taught several people how to ski, and when you have to make the turn, you have to go straight down the hill, and they just freeze. They're like, "No, I can't do it. I can't do it." And you have to learn to just dive over your ski tips, which is so counterintuitive, right? And when you finally get to the point that you realize, if I literally dive in and let gravity take me, then that's where the real joy is, because then I can complete the turn and then repeat it. And when you get that feeling of dropping down a very steep slope in that way, it feels like you're flying like a bird. But you don't get that until you overcome the fear.
Exactly, right?
Ah, that's so good.
It's a reward, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Jean, will you just give us the summary of the trip? Like you had to sail across the Drake Passage, and then you did your ski ascents and descents, and then you had to sail back. But will you tell us just in general how it all transpired?
Well, like the essence of the trip was really that, right? It's like crossing a challenging body of water, and then for 18 days, every morning you get up. If the weather allows, you have breakfast. You get ready to go backcountry skiing, which is very rapidly said, but anybody who goes backcountry skiing knows that this is quite a logistical thing to do, right? So you need all this equipment, right? You need the skins to put under your ski so that you can ski up and not down. You need a transceiver against avalanches. You need to put the skins under the skis takes time because you have to put it precisely. Then you put your ski boots into walk mode, and then you have to dress up the right way. And on this trip, on top of it, we have to rope up when we go up because we go over glaciers, like we mentioned earlier, right? To avoid falling into a crevasse, you're roping up, so that you need a harness. You need to manage the rope, and then this is already quite, not forgetting the sunscreen. So there's an endless number of logistical steps to go through. It's not just like going on a walk, right? And then to this, you add the nice complication that the trips starts from the shore, but you're on the boat, right? So now you actually you need a way to get on the shore. So that means that you have to lift up a Zodiac boat from the bridge of the ship with a winch, and you put it down in the water, and then you have to transboard all the skiing equipment onto the Zodiac, and then you go to get this to shore, and then everybody has to get to shore as well, which means this you have to do in your sailing equipment because there's salt water which could spray on the jackets, and then that will ruin their waterproofness. So you actually do all this in your sailing clothes, and then once you get on shore, you have to change from your sailing clothes.
Oh, goodness.
So this, it's like at least a 1 hour protocol just to start ski touring. But then you ski tour, right? Beautiful, go up. It's beautifully boring, no distraction, no internet, nobody can call, no social media, no TV. It's just you, your people, and nature. And then when you get on top, you remove your skins, you have maybe a lunch after 4 or 5 hours of walking, and then you come down, perhaps doing something like 1,000 meter up to 1,500 meters up in the day and down. So that can take anywhere between 2-3 hours at the least, 3-4 hours, or maybe the biggest day was like 7 hours or something like that. And then you ski down, and hopefully you have great snow. And on many days we had great snow, this so-called corn snow, which is also known as the world champion snow, right? Which is like this nice soft layer on top of a hard layer. And when you're skiing this stuff, it's like you can literally you can do carving on that, right? So that's looking down over beautiful terrain, like if you picture down like glaciers, like cubes of ice, cascading down mountains, and then glaciers, icebergs floating into blue water, and then there's a backdrop of another massive cliff there in white and black, and then blue skies over that, and just nature, right? Just beautiful, pristine environment. And then you come back to the boat, and there's 3 sailors there, and one is a French cook. So you come back to that, and they prepared a great dinner. So maybe dinner, and then maybe you read a bit something, talk with the other teammates, and then you head to bed and repeat the next day as long as there's good weather, and right. So that's pretty much what we did for 18 days, and then it was time to come back, which was quite a shocking experience actually. This was probably the thing I didn't expect from this trip. Like the coming back to civilization.
Yeah.
Because because like, we've been away from the world for a whole month, right? At its time,
Right.
and when we came back to the world, all of a sudden there was this, you open my laptop, right, and then there's an inbox with 300 emails, and everyone you have to make a decision on, and then there's all these newsletters that you get you never signed up for, and then you have to sign up for your flight, to back to Argentina and then to Europe, and if you want to sign for the flight, it's very important that you approve the cookies, right? You have to choose which cookie you want, which one you don't want, which one is essential, which one is marketing. Are you sure you want all the marketing, or you just want the personalization? And there's like all these micro decisions to make, and you try to move your pictures from the phone that's an Android onto a Mac that's an Apple, and of course it's
Right.
impossible to do. And you just literally see that the sun coming, and you're doing all this stuff that you don't really want to do. It just sends in the way, and that felt so different from being on this expedition. Like we were busy too the whole day, right? But it just felt so different. Like I came back from a sense of clarity and of calm that I never experienced before in my life, and all of a sudden you're back in the world, and then you see what it means to be in the world, because if we're in the world, we don't see it, right? We're inside it all the time. So this was like a chance to be out of it for a month. And so what I found interesting about that is what it reveals about how life can feel different. And like to me, there's like four things that I noticed there. So one thing, like number one is, if you're away from the world for a month, what happens is you don't have internet, and that means you don't get the news, right? And basically, for me, and probably for many others, the news is something that happens to me, right? It's not something that I have control over, right? It usually is negative, and it happens to me. So
Sure.
that sort of gives the sense that we don't have agency over that, right? We sort of passively submitting to something. But on the expedition is the exact opposite, because every day, like you're the agent, right? The outcome of the day is literally in your hands, right? And in your team's hand. So very different daily experience. Then in the daily world, there is this sense that our efforts can be futile, because like if you turn on TV, there's like a world-class singer there, and then or an amazing guitar player, and then you've been trying maybe learning guitar for 10 years and not no close to that. And then you log in on LinkedIn, and there's your colleagues get this promotion, and then somebody else just exited the startup, they made millions on it, and then like, my project just failed, right? So it feels like the efforts that we do can feel futile when compared to the non-stop stream of world-class achievements that we're exposed to. And they're not, right? Our efforts matter, but this is just what it can feel like. But on the boat, it's not like this, because everybody's efforts matter with 10 people. So everybody's effort is 10% of the thing, and 10% you notice. And on top of it, among 10 people, everybody's contributing unmatched skills there, right? So everybody's the best at something and makes a difference. Mechanics, sailing, mountaineering, skiing, humor, listening, cooking, right? There's got to be something that you're the best at in the group, right? So then your efforts automatically matter. Number three, in the world, we communicate a lot with screens, right? And the problem with this is that we lose the body cues, body language, the tone of the voice, the eye contact, and that can be isolating, right? Because we didn't evolve to communicate through screens. Well, on the boats, on this expedition, you only communicate with eye contact, with the voice, and with the body language, right?
It's real.
And so if it's real, and this is how we meant to live and communicate. So after 4 months of this, I just felt this sense of belonging, right? Of humanity that sometimes we can forget if we are stuck with screens. And last is this in the world we're exposed to notifications and addictive content. It's really hard to resist like addictive series, right? Or like endless walls, and we had series that are designed to put us into the next episode, never ending. But in Antarctica, there's none of that, right? Because there's no internet. So basically, you're alone with your thoughts, right? So there's nothing to distract you, and then you get this sense of sovereignty over what you think, because there's no stimulus. Everything comes from inside. I mean, there's 11 people around you, right? But it's not like there's not a whole worldwide machine pumping content into you all the time. So the thoughts that come from inside, and so you get this sovereignty over your thoughts and over your attention. And so, yeah, just being exposed to this environment for 4 weeks, of course, I came back and I felt calmest and clearer in my mind than I had ever been in my life, right? And so from this, I brought back this aspiration not to leave the world, because the answer in my view is not to go and full hermit and buy a cabin at the end of, I don't know, Montana perhaps, or northern Sweden in Europe. Of course, maybe this is good and it has its place for maybe at some point in one's life, right? But I want to be in the world because I need the funding in order to have employees and work on scientific problems. I need the clinical infrastructure to get access to patient samples. So I need the institutions, right? But to me, it's all about now carving oasis of sovereignty over attention and protecting the time for doing what I think matters, right? So which for me, it's thinking deeply about scientific problems for 2-3 hours every day, unbothered by demands from the system or by those technologies that hijack attentions.
Man, I love your phraseology there. Sovereignty over your thoughts and sovereignty over your attention. I think that's what the world all too easily takes away from us if we don't guard that carefully. And that's an amazing thing to learn from this sort of an expedition. That's life impacting. Learning how to manage our modern world in a way that still allows you to have that sovereignty. Otherwise, what can we accomplish?
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of leads to your research, right? I mean, you're sorting out how to guide immune cells to destroy cancer cells. That's mind-blowing. And if we get that one figured out, we've got the cancer problem solved. Not only cancer, you also probably have learned how to solve autoimmune dysfunctions, allergies, lots of other things where our bodies and our immune system get out of whack with each other. And if we can learn how to talk to that immune system in a way where we can guide it somehow, I mean, that's mind-blowing to me, that area of research. And I know it seems like maybe that's whiplash to people. We're just talking about this outing to Antarctica, and all of a sudden we're talking about how you can guide the immune system to do things for us that really need to happen, but there's a connection there. Talk to us about that connection, because it's in you, right? You're the connector.
Right. Yeah, right. So I love how you put it. So what's the connection? First of all, I don't want to overclaim here, right? So we're working really hard on this problem, and I'm convinced we can make a clear impact on solving that problem. And
Sure.
There's a community of scientists trying to accomplish this, right? So this is like perhaps thousands of scientists worldwide that are trying to fix that problem. So we work on this as a community. But yeah, really, what's the connection between Antarctica and getting immune cells to find and kill cancer cells? Like, I haven't thought about this that deeply, to be honest. But the first thing that comes to mind really would be that it's interesting because of two reasons. First of all, it's tricky, it's important, and there's an aesthetic to it. So perhaps going to Antarctica wasn't important. So let's drop that one. That doesn't really do nothing much tangible in the world. Right? This was really a personal, something that I went to do for its own sake. Right? There's not like a global, doesn't have to make a difference on others. So let's keep the sense of challenging and the beauty in doing it. So the sense of challenge is that, so if you go on an expedition, there are these physical challenges to be overcome, right? We mentioned them, like doing backcountry skiing far away from rescue on glaciers in a wild environment, crossing a different body of water. And in science, it's the same thing, right? You're doing this sort of intellectual first ascent that you're trying to solve problems that have never been solved before. Nobody knows the answers. You're the first one stepping into a unknown terrain. And that's difficult because most of these things that you try, they fail. So you need to have the creativity of imagining new paths, the skill to go down those paths properly. Because if you lose your way after 2 steps, you're not going to properly explore the path. And then you need to have the persistence to try again when it leads to a dead end, right? So and essentially this is how all research breakthroughs happen. And so the same thing happens on an expedition, right? So that's a common thread. And then the other side of this is just the beauty of it. So we are going into nature. There's just this sense of awe in front of those terrains, right? The majesticity of glaciers and mountains and never-ending shape of the waves when you're at sea and being swayed by this and the wind blowing into the sails. I mean, this is absolutely beautiful. And it's the same thing that you get in the research, because the beauty that I find in research is you usually come to a research problem in a place of confusion, right? That there's this thing that we don't understand, and then you look at it from this angle, and it's confusing because from the other angle it seems to mean something else. And if you think hard about it, like, you find the angle from which complexity becomes simple, right? And so finding the hidden simplicity in how nature works, and in my case is how cells are controlling each other through specific molecular signals. So finding this fundamental simplicity where initially there's this puzzling complexity that makes no sense. Like, once you find the simplicity, this is so beautiful, right? It doesn't have to be complicated when you look at it from the right angle. And so this is for me the beauty we have in research, and that's probably the thing we would find both in research and then going on an adventure like this one.
Wow, well said. I think if more people could view discoveries in knowledge or in science like that grand adventure, we might have more people interested in the field, right? Who could realize that there's beauty there, but it's also very much like the mountain. You can't get to the top except by taking one step at a time.
Yeah.
And you really don't know what the experience is going to be like until you do that one step at a time.
Yeah.
And and then the beauty. Surprised by beauty is something that I think happens to me a lot when I'm out in nature. It's like, I didn't expect that, and then boom, wow, look. That happens in your research, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't plan it, right? It's like,
no,
you tried 25 things before, none of them worked, and then you try the 26, and then it doesn't look the way you wanted, but then then you say, oh, what if it was that way? We never thought of that, right? So yeah, I mean, perhaps in climbing it's a bit the same thing. I mean, I don't know if you're a climber, but I hear sometimes climbers, they try this puzzle and then try different body positions, and then they can't make it through the line, and then oh, what if you try it like this, right? And then you have this breakthrough, and perhaps there's something similar there.
It's put your pinky in a different place and shift your hips an inch to the left. I know that sounds nuts, but that's really what it turns into sometimes. It's trying enough things to find just the right solution.
Yeah.
And the endurance and the tenacity that we learn from adventure sports. I mean, I'm sure that there are times in your research where you really need to dig deep into endurance and tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think these adventures outdoors have helped with that?
Yes, a good question. Here we have to be careful with causation and correlation, right? So
yes,
is it that people who have a natural tendency for endurance and persistence end up being adventurers or scientists, or is it the other way around? Or perhaps it goes both ways. I wouldn't know. This is probably a open research question. Maybe somebody answered that, but I wouldn't know. But I suppose some of it can be trained, right? Because I don't know. Because maybe we're not born. Are we born persistent and endurant, or are we trained? Perhaps most of us have a certain natural capacity for it, and then perhaps an extent of that can be trained. Let's go with that, right? That would be the hopeful and empowering version of it.
I've taught many people how to climb mountains and do things like that, and I can say that it is both nature and nurture. Everyone has capacity for it. Some people crave it. They can't get enough. They have to do it. And others learn to.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm not sure I want it. Is this really what I need in my life? It's not their primary driver like it is for other people, but I have found everybody benefits.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense,
Yeah.
Can we talk about the social dynamic a little bit more?
Yeah.
Being put in I'm going to call it a stressful environment. It's persistent, pervasive almost, because you're doing a long crossing in dangerous waters, and then you're skiing in crevasses, and crevasse glaciated areas. I mean, persistent, facing of challenges and dangers in a group that can't get away from each other. Do you have a story about some group dynamic that had to be resolved?
Yeah, definitely. I love that you asked because this is, that's really reason to go there, and this was the main one, right? It's like I really want to go on this trip to experience this idea of group cohesion, right? Which is a situation where the collective has to come before the individual because you only perform and survive as a group, right? And
Yeah.
and I felt that myself, I was born in the 80s, right? So I didn't have really, the experience being born in the 80s, and so far has been that you don't really need group cohesion to function in modern world, right? Because much of it is designed so that you can just operate on your own, right? I mean, there's credit cards, you can stream, you can buy, take away, and you don't really need others for many things in daily life. But I read about this group cohesion idea when I was reading military memoirs, right? And I get interested in that because growing up as a teenager first and as a young adult then, I noticed that for me and many others, groups can bring up challenges, right? Because there are all these social triggers that can bring about automatic emotional and thought patterns that prevent us from performing in our best because then we might be on autopilot and not deliberate. And so the idea there was that I wanted to go on this trip because I felt this is a great way to be strongly exposed to a situation of group cohesion where you really have to perform as a group. And I was really interested in exploring this and intensifying this practice because when I started my lab, back in 2019, I went from being this lonely scientist, working on the computer or at the bench, to being the captain of my team, right? And then having to work with people for most of the day. And it was great, except that sometimes people they don't do what you want, right? So I really had this strong investment in wanting to experience and practice the skills of group cohesion. And so the main thing that I try to practice there is this idea of what I call self-leadership, which is about noticing where we're being emotionally activated and not thinking clearly, being on autopilot, noticing that, and then naming the feeling that's what's going on there. Are we angry? Are we scared? And then naming what's happening there, like why are we like this? What's the trigger? What's the need? What boundary maybe is being attacked? And then from this place that can create enough of a wedge in our attention that we can choose deliberately, right? And so I went on this trip with the deliberate intention of practicing this. And this is not from me, right? I took this from modern psychology, which Daniel Kahneman wrote about this into fast thinking, slow thinking, and it goes all the way back to contemplative roots like the Buddha, right, 3,000 years ago, and so on. Okay, but for me, this was about how does it work in practice in such a situation, in such an environment where we have to perform under pressure. And so one moment where this came handy is that on the last day that we did climbing, this was going to be the most technical climb of the expedition, which I didn't know at this time. And we were roping up in the morning, right? We're just getting to shore. And everybody was roping up. So we had 3 teams of 3 people, and there were 2 mountain guides. So that meant that there was one rope team that didn't have a mountain guide. And on that day, I wanted to be on that team because I had been really on a friendly basis with the 2 other people that were on this team. And I'm like, oh, let's do this one together today. So I got my rope into my harness. I started to tie up. And the mountain guy said, he saw that, the leader of the expedition, he saw that. And he said, Jean, you're going to rope up with a mountain guide rope team. And immediately I sensed this frustration in his rising, right?
Right.
And so noticing this, I tried to name it. What is this? Yeah, it's frustration. I'm feeling angry here. And I tried to name it. Why? And it was pretty obvious. It's my ego here. Because I had been on climb like this like 50 times. I had practiced this for years, right, to be ready. And half of those climb I had done without mountain guides, the same difficulty, like PD minus on the mountaineering scale, right? Not world-class climbing, but like somebody who has done some mountaineering. And I was the one leading the road team there without mountain guides. I'm like, I can do this. I don't need to be on a mountain guide team. And so noticing this then gave me a sense to choose, right? And so rapidly I thought, well, this is about my ego. So actually I'm paying this expedition leader because I want him to handle the safety so I can just enjoy instead of being, thinking about, is this safe? Are we doing this the right way? I can just leave this to him and he handles it and I just enjoy. So is he asking me to do something unsafe? No. If anything, being with a mountain guide is safer. So no problem there. And second, I realized that I came here because I want to practice group cohesion, right? So this is my chance, right? I can be the team member that supports a swift departure and, and doesn't delay by starting an argument there. And just play team, right? Well, how does it feel like, right? So it's like, well, this is my chance to experience it, and so I did that, and the climb went great. It was a beautiful day, and at the end of the day, I got a chance to ask him why he asked me to be on this other rope team over dinner, and his answer was that this was going to be the most technical climb of the expedition, and therefore he didn't want to recompose new rope teams that day. So he wanted the rope team to be the same day as the day before, and that's why he didn't want me to join that team in particular, right? So this is a time where it came in handy. And and beyond that, there's also possibilities to repair, right? So of course, most of us, me the first, we're not at the level of the Buddha yet, right? So there's going to be times where our human instincts don't allow us pausing, noticing, naming, choosing. And in that time, we can always repair, right? So that's another side of this self-leadership aspect that I practice on this expedition to repair if not catching the pattern in time.
Fascinating. I want to bring up your book because I'm sure that by reading the book, people can get a much more in-depth understanding of this expedition. How much of the book shares insights like this?
Well, the purpose of the book is really to bring those insights onto a page, because I didn't go on this trip planning to write a book. Right. Essentially, I was on this trip, and every evening I was taking notes on my bunk, on my tablet, and they were like just hand scribbles. And when I came back, I felt that I'm not going to be able to read this, 2 months in the future. I would have forgotten what it means. So I started to type them up a bit more clearly on the computer, and all of a sudden I had 30 pages. Then it dawned on me that I don't want to forget this, right? I don't want to forget this sense of what it felt to come back. I don't want to forget what I learned, and I don't want to forget, because memories will disappear, right? So I really wanted to take this whole experience, put into a box that I can reopen at any time, and this is how the book sort of wrote itself there, right? And so then all of a sudden, I did some pictures, and then it was 200 pages, and I'm like, well, now being this far, maybe it's something that might interest others, because other people were asking me about how the trip was, right? So this is how the book came together. And so my intention there was basically to capture the experience of the adventure and the lessons learned in terms of self-leadership applied in the context of an extreme environment, which I hope can serve anyone interested in how to function better when working with others on the pressure, right? So from an expedition to a research lab to perhaps a startup or other environments.
I'm sure that there are many insights and applications that we can draw from that. I love it. Those are the best books, too, the ones that write themselves. When you're like, oh, wow, I got to really just get these thoughts on paper. And the next thing you know, it's maybe I should share this. That's beautiful. The name of the book is Skiing and Sailing Antarctica. Does it have a subtitle?
Yes. Leading Yourself When There Is Nowhere to Hide.
Great. And where can people find it?
So the best place would be my website, so gene.hausser.org with 2 S. Yeah, or if you don't remember, just Google that.
So gene.hausser.org, that's Jean and HAUSSER.
Exactly. Thanks for spelling that out, Kurt. I appreciate that.
.org. Jean, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. We could go for another hour, I'm sure, but I really appreciate the way that you encapsulated not only what you did, but so many life lessons in there as well. And your English is better than mine. Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Everyone listen. I think Jean did a fantastic job of explaining why getting out there is worth it. We can learn so much from it. And I mean, he even illustrated how sometimes it just feels selfish, like it's not an important thing to do. But when people read your book and they're motivated and they find ways to contribute to the greater good, suddenly this trip takes on a whole other meaning, and that can happen. So people, the book again is Skiing and Sailing Antarctica. Until the next show, make sure you figure out your thing and get out there and have some fun.